At Starbound, we tell stories the human way, not with artificial voices or AI slop. In the end, what's HFY without humanity? Subscribe to keep it this way. My name's General G. Let's begin. The mission was simple in its essence. Protect a group of scientists studying samples from a death world. What Krill couldn't understand, however, was why the humans had sent this useless one-eyed elder, carrying a battered gun on his back. Krill and Edyp were discussing this very subject as the captain of their small craft searched for a suitable landing spot below. "I guess the humans don't care much about the little sative scientists if this crippled human was all they sent," Krill said. His neck rotated with the speed that only avians possessed, turning a full 180 degrees to observe the human seated alone near the ship's door. The human sat motionless, his weathered face partially obscured by shadow, one eye covered by a worn black patch that had seen better days. The other eye remained closed, as if the human was sleeping or simply didn't care about his surroundings. Krill's yellow eyes, sharp as those of any predator on wings, studied the figure with growing disdain. He saw not a warrior, but only a burden that they would have to carry as soon as the ship landed. The human's weapon, if it could even be called that, looked ancient, a long rifle with scratched metal and worn wood, strapped across his back like some relic from a forgotten museum. "You're right about that," Edyp replied. "Even if that old weapon worked, I doubt this human would be able to hit anything with a single visual appendage. What good is a marksman who can't judge distance properly?" Krill's attention moved to Edyp, and he realized that his companion's appearance still unsettled him a bit, even after 3 missions together. Edyp was a zeol, a green biped with a sleek, almost insectoid build. 2 large eyes dominated his face, multifaceted and constantly shifting their focus. But what made the zeol truly remarkable were the 2 additional eyes mounted on the tips of his antennae, which swayed gently above his head, providing him with an almost 360-degree field of vision. The zeol were rumored to have the second-best eyesight across all the known species of the Galactic Council, only losing to Krill's species themselves, the Kavrion, who had inherited all the advantages typical of birds of prey from their evolutionary ancestors. Krill had trained for years to maximize his natural gifts. His eyes could spot movement from miles away, track multiple targets simultaneously, and adjust different light spectrums faster than most species could blink. He took pride in this, as did all Kavrion. To see a human already handicapped by their species' average vision, with only 1 functioning eye, well, it was almost insulting that the humans thought this creature could contribute anything to their mission. "Why do you think he's so silent?" Edyp asked, his antennae eyes swiveling to observe the human once more. "He hasn't said a word since he boarded, not even a greeting." Krill's feathers ruffled, a gesture of dismissal. "Probably shy, or ashamed. Imagine being sent on a mission with true warriors like ourselves, knowing you're completely outclassed. We can shoot a target across a mile with our modern laser rifles, pick off threats before they even know we're there. What can he do with that ancient ballistic weapon? Probably can't see past 100 meters with that one eye." The ship's engines changed pitch, signaling their final approach. Through the viewport, Krill could see the clearing below, a perfect circle carved into the dense alien forest, with the Sativ research base sitting like a small cluster of white domes in the center. The Death World designation seemed almost laughable from this height. Sure, the vegetation was thick and the wildlife readings showed some concerning biosignatures, but nothing 2 trained warriors couldn't handle. The landing gear extended, and the ship settled onto the ground with a gentle thump. Krill stood, adjusting his equipment harness and checking his laser rifle one more time. Beside him, Edyp did the same, his 4 eyes conducting their own independent equipment checks. "Ready?" Edyp asked. "Always," Krill replied. "Let's show these scientists what real protection looks like. Maybe the human will learn something before he—" The hatch opened at once. Krill stopped mid-sentence as the human simply stood up, grabbed his ancient rifle, and walked out without a word. No glance at them, no confirmation with the captain about atmospheric safety, no discussion of the mission parameters. The old human just stepped through the hatch and was gone, disappearing from view. Krill and Edyp stared at each other in silence, both too stunned to speak immediately. The audacity of it, the sheer unprofessionalism. "Did he just—" Edyp began. "He didn't even check if the air was breathable," Krill finished, his beak clicking in agitation. "Humans, they think they're so tough because they come from a death world, but this one's clearly lost what few survival instincts his species possessed." They made their way to the hatch, weapons ready, half expecting to find the human collapsed on the ground, poisoned by some atmospheric incompatibility. Instead, they found nothing but disturbed grass where he'd walked. In the distance, they could see the Sativ base, its white domes gleaming in the orange sunlight of this world star. "Where did he go?" Edyp asked, his antennae eyes scanning the perimeter while his facial eyes focused on the base. Krill pointed with one wing arm toward the cargo hold. The external compartment was already open, its door hanging down to form a ramp. "He must have gotten his gear." They approached the cargo area and found it exactly as Krill had predicted, already opened, already ransacked. The human's equipment was gone, one large backpack and two heavy briefcases that had been secured in the climate-controlled section. Through the opening, Krill caught a glimpse of the human's back as he walked not toward the Sativ base, but directly into the tree line of the forest. "Is he insane?" Krill squawked, his head feathers rising in alarm. "The forest? The most dangerous part of any death world is always the forest." Edyp's antennae drooped as he spoke. "We haven't even heard his voice yet, not a single word, and now he's just walking into certain death." "Bold and stupid," Krill muttered, watching the human's form disappear into the shadows between the massive trees. "A fatal combination." They retrieved their own equipment, compact but sophisticated. Krill's laser rifle could be assembled and disassembled in under a minute, its components fitting neatly into a specialized pack. Edyp had a similar model, though his was calibrated for his unique vision spectrum. They also grabbed sensor equipment, portable shields, medical supplies, and enough rations for a week. "What's our strategy?" Edyp asked as they did a final gear check. Krill's tactical mind was already working through the scenarios. "The Sativ base is in the center of the clearing. We need overlapping fields of fire to cover all approaches. I'll take the north side, you take the south. We find elevated positions, preferably in the trees, and set up proper sniper nests. From there, we can see everything that approaches." "What about the human?" Edyp asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "What about him?" Krill replied. "He made his choice. We'll do our job, protect the scientists. If the human wants to play explorer in the forest, that's his problem. We don't need him anyway. Two trained warriors with superior vision and modern weapons? We'll accomplish this mission easily." Edyp's antennae bobbed in agreement. "And if anyone asks what happened to him?" "We'll report that the human disappeared into the forest and was probably eaten by something. Simple." They shared what passed for a smile between their species, Krill's beak clicking, Edyp's facial mandibles spreading a bit. It was decided then. They would look out for each other as true warriors should, and complete the mission without the liability that the humans had saddled them with. The two of them split up, moving to opposite sides of the clearing. Krill headed north, his sharp eyes already identifying the perfect tree. A massive specimen with branches thick enough to support his weight and height, enough to give him clear sight lines across the entire clearing. The climb was effortless for him. His taloned feet gripped the bark with ease, and his wings, while not capable of true flight in his species' modern form, still provided balance and lift that made scaling the tree almost leisurely. At the top, roughly 40 meters above the ground, Krill found a cluster of branches that formed a natural platform. He spent the next 2 hours preparing his position with the meticulous care of a professional. First, he secured himself with a safety harness. No need to take unnecessary risks. Then he assembled his laser rifle, locking each component into place until the weapon warmed with ready power. He set up a small, foldable platform that would keep the rifle stable and allow him to adjust his aim smoothly across his entire field of view. Finally, he tested his sightlines. Through his scope, enhanced by his natural Cavrion vision, he could see everything. The Sativ base sat in perfect clarity in the middle of the clearing, its white domes practically glowing in the afternoon light. He could see the scientists moving inside through the transparent sections of their structures, small, furry beings with large eyes and delicate builds. They looked vulnerable, which is exactly why warriors like him were necessary. Panning right, Krill found Edyp's chosen position at the opposite end of the clearing. The Zeol had selected a tree similar to his own, and Krill could just make out the shape of his partner's nest among the branches. As if sensing Krill's attention, Edyp waved, an exaggerated gesture that was clearly meant to be seen through a scope. Krill activated his comm unit. "Position secured. I have clear sight on the base and your location. How's your view?" "Perfect," Edyp's voice crackled through the earpiece. "I can see you too. Any sign of indigenous threats?" "Nothing yet. The base seems quiet. The scientists are doing their work." "Good. This might actually be a boring week." The hours passed with relative quiet. Krill settled into the rhythm that all snipers knew, the meditative state of constant awareness without tension. His eyes scanned continuously, cataloging every movement, every shadow, every potential threat. Birds, or their alien equivalents, flew through the canopy. Small creatures scurried along branches. In the distance, he occasionally caught glimpses of larger animals moving through the underbrush, but none approached the clearing. The sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Krill allowed himself a moment to appreciate the beauty of it before returning his attention to his scope. "Edyp, did you ever catch sight of the human?" Krill asked through the comm. There was a pause before Edyp responded. "No, not once. I've been checking periodically, even accessed the Sativ network to review their perimeter cameras. The human just vanished the moment he entered the forest. Not a trace." Krill felt a small twinge of something he didn't want to acknowledge. Concern, maybe, or confusion. How could the human just vanish like that? Even if he'd been attacked and killed by a large predator, there should be signs. Disturbed vegetation, scavenger activity, something. He pushed the feeling to the back of his mind. The human wasn't his responsibility. "See anything dangerous out there?" Krill asked instead, changing the subject. "Any threats we should be aware of?" "Some small creatures that seem harmless," Edyp replied. "I've spotted a few larger animals too, things that look scary, all teeth and claws, but they're too distant to be a problem. Everything seems to avoid the clearing. Nothing to worry about here close to the Sativ base." Krill left his scope for a moment, his eyes adjusting to normal distance vision. He reached into his storage pack and pulled out a protein bar. Standard military rations. Tasteless, but nutritious. "This is going to be a long week," he said, taking a bite. Edyp laughed through the comm. "Sure will be. Hold on, I'm going to take a break and eat something too. Even my species needs fuel." "Take your time. I've got overwatch." As the sun continued its descent, Krill found himself relaxing despite his earlier concerns. Maybe this mission would be simple after all. The Death World designation probably came from some of the more remote regions of this planet. Here, in this carefully selected clearing, everything seemed calm, almost peaceful. Night approached faster than Krill expected, the orange sun dropping below the tree line with surprising speed. The sudden darkness reminded him that they hadn't discussed sleeping arrangements. "Edyp, we need to talk about watch rotations," Krill said into his comm. "We'll have to take turns through the night. Someone needs to be alert at all times." "Agreed. What do you prefer?" "I'm calling dibs on the first sleeping turn," Krill said quickly, cursing the absent human once again. If the old man had stayed with them, they could have rotated between 3 people, meaning more sleep for everyone. Now it would be just the 2 of them, meaning longer shifts and less rest. All avians are early risers. I'd rather sleep when the orange sun goes down than try to sleep in the middle of the night. My body clock won't cooperate otherwise. Works for me, Edyp replied easily. My species only needs a few hours of rest each night. I can keep watch while you rest. Just set your alarm for, let's say, 4 hours from now. That'll give you decent sleep and I can rest after. Krill appreciated his partner's flexibility. Despite his unsettling appearance, Edyp was a solid warrior and a trustworthy companion. Still, trust only went so far. Krill set several presence alarms around his tree, small devices that would alert him if anything larger than a small animal came within 20 meters. Better safe than sorry. He found a covered branch that was perfect for sleeping, hidden from view by a cluster of large leaves but still secure. His taloned feet gripped the branch naturally, locking in place in the way his species had evolved for sleeping in high places. He adjusted his harness one more time, making sure he wouldn't fall even if he shifted in his sleep. As he settled in, Krill thought briefly about the human. The old man was probably having a hard time in the forest right now, if he hadn't been devoured already. No shelter, no partner to watch his back. And that ancient weapon would probably jam after the first shot, if it even worked at all. Krill felt the edges of sleep claiming him, his consciousness fading into the peaceful darkness of rest. Then something wet splattered across his black feathers. His eyes snapped open in confusion. More wetness rained down, thick, viscous, and reeking of something chemical and alien. He looked up and saw pieces of something falling through the branches above him. Chunks of flesh, segments of carapace, all of it tumbling down through the canopy like grotesque confetti. Only then did he hear the bang from the distance. Not the clean, silent whoosh of a laser rifle, a bang, a crack, the report of a ballistic weapon echoing through the forest. Krill fumbled for his flashlight, his heart pounding in his chest. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the carnage around him. Pieces everywhere. Segments of what looked like a centipede creature, each section as long as his arm, with dozens of barbed legs still twitching. Half of its body lay intact on the ground below, motionless now, but its size was staggering. It must have been 5 meters long when whole. His training kicked in. Krill immediately rushed back to his rifle, securing himself behind it and activating his comm. Edyp, what happened? Are you seeing this? No reply. Edyp, respond! Still nothing. Panic began to set in. Krill pressed his eye to his scope and panned across the clearing toward Edyp's position. What he saw made his blood freeze. Edyp was gone. No, not gone, being eaten. 2 of those centipede creatures had found him. One had already killed him. Krill could see Edyp's body lying limp in the branches, his 4 eyes vacant and staring. The second creature was in the process of pulling him apart, its mandibles working through armor and flesh alike. Krill's training overrode his horror. His finger found the trigger. The laser rifle charged and fired. The beam crossed the clearing in an instant, coherent light hitting true on one of the centipede creatures. It exploded in a shower of green blood, the superheated beam cooking it from the inside out. But the other one simply vanished. Krill blinked, certain his eyes were playing tricks. But no, the creature had been there one moment, and the next it was gone. Not moved, not fled, simply blended in with its environment, its colors mixing with the surroundings so perfectly that even his enhanced Kavrion vision couldn't detect it. Fear unlike anything Krill had ever experienced locked his body in place. If they could do that, camouflage so perfectly that even he couldn't see them, then what guarantee did he have that there weren't more around him right now? They could be climbing his tree at this very moment, inches away, and he wouldn't know until their mandibles found his throat. His breathing came in short, sharp gasps. His hands trembled on his rifle. This was wrong. This was all wrong. They were supposed to be the superior warriors. They were supposed to have the advantage of vision, of technology, of position. But what good was any of that against an enemy you couldn't see? A voice crackled through his helmet, pulling him from his frozen state. "Listen carefully, Krill." The voice was calm, human. On this channel, it could only belong to one person, the third member of their group, the old man they'd dismissed, the crippled human with one eye and an ancient rifle. "If you want to survive tonight, you can't panic," the human continued. "I'm looking at your tree through my scope right now. You're safe. There's nothing on your trunk, nothing in the branches above or below you. You're clear." Krill's breath came easier, but confusion warred with relief. "How?" "The Sativ base is safe, too," the human interrupted. "I've got it covered. And, Krill, I'm sorry I couldn't save Edyp. I didn't have a clear line of sight to his position. There's not a spot tall enough in this forest where I could see everything. Had to make a choice about which sectors I could cover. I chose the base and your location. I'm sorry." Questions exploded in Krill's mind. How are you so sure there aren't more of those creatures? How are you still alive? How are you able to save me? Where? "One at a time," the human said, and Krill could hear a smile in his voice. "I've got various filters on my scope. Thermal, infrared, ultraviolet, motion detection, and a few others that I've learned to trust over the years. One of them picks up these creatures, shows them as ghosts even when they're camouflaged. Not perfectly, but enough. Funny thing," the human laughed, actually laughed in the middle of this nightmare. "Not even infrared can see them clearly. They're cold-blooded, match the ambient temperature almost perfectly. But they do reflect ultraviolet in a specific range, probably something to do with their carapace composition. Once I figured that out, this mission became a lot easier." Krill was taken aback by the calmness in that voice. The fact that they were facing death, that Edyp was dead, that they were dealing with invisible predators. None of it seemed to affect the human. He spoke like he was discussing the weather, not a desperate battle for survival. "Where are you?" Krill demanded. "Can't tell you that," the human replied simply. Krill wanted to be annoyed at the secrecy, but the human had saved his life. That bought a lot of tolerance. What do I do now?" Krill asked, hating how small his voice sounded. "Now, you keep your scope on that base. You watch for anything that tries to approach it from your side. If you see movement that doesn't look right, shadows that don't match, grass that bends wrong, anything, you shoot at it with your laser rifle. I'll handle everything else." "But I can't see them. They're camouflage." "You'd be surprised what you can see when you look properly," the human said. "They're not perfect. The camouflage has a tell, like light bending around them. Your eyes are better than mine ever were, even when I had both of them. You'll see it if you look for it." The calm went silent. Krill sat behind his rifle, his heart's still racing, and he tried to do what the human said. He looked through his scope, searching for those telltale signs. Light bending, movement that didn't match the wind. And there, he saw it. Just a small distortion near the tree line, like the air was folding in on itself. His finger squeezed the trigger, and his laser beam lanced out. It hit something. The camouflage failed, and for a split second, he saw another of those centipede creatures before it exploded under the superheated beam. "Good shot!" the human's voice crackled. 2 o'clock from the base, 30 meters out. You got another one." Krill adjusted his aim, found the distortion, fired. Another kill. "You're getting the hang of it." The rest of the night became something Krill knew he would never forget for as long as he lived. Sleep was impossible. Every moment brought new terror, new threats. New proof of how drastically they had underestimated this death world and its inhabitants. The creatures came in waves, drawn by the presence of the sative base or perhaps by the scent of death from their fallen members. Krill's tree seemed to be particularly attractive to them. 3 times he had to fire at creatures climbing his trunk, their barbed legs gripping the bark with unsettling ease. Each time, the human's voice guided him. 4 meters below you, moving up the east side. Take the shot! And each time Krill did, blasting the creatures apart before they could reach him. But the base was a different story entirely, and watching the human defend it was an education in warfare that Krill had never expected. The creatures approached from every angle, sometimes alone, sometimes in pairs. The human shot them all. Each kill was clean, devastating. The ballistic rounds, whatever ancient ammunition that battered rifle was firing, didn't just wound, they obliterated. When a bullet hit one of those creatures, it didn't just penetrate. It transferred so much kinetic energy that the target literally came apart, segments exploding in different directions. What amazed Krill even more was how the human kept moving. After every shot, maybe every 2 shots, that distant crack would come from a different location. The human was repositioning constantly, never staying in one place long enough for anything to find him. Krill tried to pinpoint his location by sound, by the direction of his shots, by any means possible. He failed every time. The human remained a ghost, present and effective, but impossible to locate. Hours crawled by. The alien sun began its rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. The attack slowed as dawn approached, then ceased altogether as daylight claimed the forest. Krill remained at his post, exhausted beyond anything he'd ever experienced. His eyes burned from staring through the scope all night. His muscles ached from remaining tensed and ready. He'd gone through 3 power packs for his laser rifle, draining them dry with constant firing. But he was alive. "Krill!" The human's voice came through the comm, startling him from his exhausted daze. "Good work tonight. Why don't you come down from there? Meet me in front of the base. We've got work to do before tonight comes around again." "Where are you?" Krill asked, scanning the forest one more time. "Walking toward the base from the south side. You'll see me in a minute." Sure enough, the human emerged from the tree line, moving with a smooth gait that seemed at odds with his apparent age. Up close in daylight, he looked even more weathered than Krill remembered from the ship. Deep lines marked his face, scars crisscrossed his visible skin, and his black eye patch had clearly been repaired multiple times. But his movements were fluid as he approached the base, his ancient rifle slung across his back. Krill climbed down from his tree on shaking legs, nearly losing his grip twice from pure exhaustion. By the time he reached the ground, the human was already at the base's main entrance, talking with one of the sative scientists through the communications panel. "Yes, I understand," the human was saying. "No, you did the right thing by staying inside. We'll make sure tonight is safer. Just send out that equipment list I asked for, and stay inside until I give the all-clear." The human turned as Krill approached, and for the first time, Krill got a good look at his face. The man's remaining eye was a pale blue, startling against his weather-beaten skin. That eye studied Krill with an intensity that made the Kavrian understand, suddenly, that the human saw more with one eye than most beings saw with 2. "You did good last night," the human said, extending a hand in the human gesture of greeting. "Sorry about your partner. That wasn't the plan." Krill reached out with his wing arm, awkwardly gripping the human's hand. I didn't know they could camouflage like that. We weren't prepared." "No, you weren't," the human agreed, not unkindly. "Intel is always incomplete on death worlds. There's always something the surveys miss. That's why they send people like me. I've learned to expect the unexpected." "How long have you been doing this?" The human's eye crinkled at the corner, a smile. "Longer than you've been alive, probably. Come on, we got work to do before tonight." Over the next several hours, Krill received an education in practical defense that no military academy could have provided. The human, who finally introduced himself as Henry, moved through the clearing with the expertise of someone who had done this hundreds of times before. They started by planting landmines, not the sophisticated programmable mines that modern militaries used, but simple, brutal devices that Henry assembled from supplies the Sativ scientists provided. "Complexity fails," Henry explained as he showed Krill how to arm each mine. "When you're on a death world, you want weapons that work even if they get dirty, wet, frozen, or covered in alien blood. Simple mechanics, pressure plates, chemical explosives, nothing fancy, but effective." They placed the mines at every approach to the clearing, focusing on the areas where the forest was thickest. Henry showed Krill how to read the ground, how to identify the paths that predators would naturally follow based on the terrain and vegetation. Next came the remote-controlled bombs, larger charges that Henry positioned at what he called choke points. These were spots where the forest created natural funnels, where trees grew close together or where the ground dipped into small ravines. "If something big comes, and something big always comes on a death world, we need ways to hurt it from range. These'll do the job." As they worked, Henry taught Krill other lessons. How to mask his scent by rubbing mud and local leaves on his feathers and equipment. How to find safe positions. How to move quietly through alien terrain. The sun reached its peak as they finished their preparations. Henry surveyed their work with satisfaction, his one eye calmly scanning the perimeter. That night, and the nights that followed, proceeded with a grim routine. The creatures came, drawn by whatever instinct or intelligence drove them. They hit the mines and died. They approached the choke points, and Henry detonated the charges, blasting them apart. The ones that made it through faced Krill's laser fire and Henry's ballistic rounds. Krill found himself learning more with each engagement. He learned to spot the camouflage tells more quickly. He learned to anticipate the creature's approaches, reading the subtle signs in the vegetation that Henry had taught him. He learned to conserve his energy ammunition, making each shot count rather than spraying fire wildly. But most of all, he learned to appreciate Henry's presence. The human never seemed to tire, never seemed to panic, never made a careless mistake. His voice through the comm was always calm, always certain, providing guidance when Krill needed it and silence when he didn't. On the third night, Krill managed to sleep for a few hours. He could only do so because Henry told him, "I've got your tree in my scope right now. Nothing's around it. Sleep. I'll wake you if that changes." And Krill did sleep, because he trusted that voice. Trusted that one-eyed human in a way he'd never expected to trust anyone he couldn't see. The week passed in a blur of days spent resting and maintaining equipment, and nights spent fighting off the endless waves of predators that the Death World spawned. The Sativ scientists continued their research during the daylight hours, always nervous, always grateful, always hurrying back inside before sunset. On the final day, as they waited for the ship that would extract them and bring in a fresh crew, Krill found himself standing next to Henry outside the base. The human was cleaning his rifle, an activity he performed daily with almost ritualistic care. "Henry," Krill said, "how long have you been doing this? Protection details on death worlds." Henry paused in his cleaning, his one eye focusing on something distant. "Longer than you've been alive, like I said. Started when I was 18. That was, 49 years ago now." "You've been in this life for 47 years?" Krill couldn't keep the shock from his voice. Most warriors didn't last a decade in this profession. The ones who survived that long usually moved into training or administrative roles. "And you're still taking field assignments?" Henry smiled, a sad expression. "I keep saying I'll retire after the next mission. Said it after the last 10 missions too, but the truth is, this is what I'm good at." "What happened to your eye?" Krill asked, then immediately regretted the personal question. "Sorry, I shouldn't." "It's fine. Henry waved off the apology. "Got careless on a protection detail similar to this one. Didn't spot a creature in time, and it got close enough to take a swipe. Lost the eye, but killed the beast with my knife before he could finish the job." Krill thought about his own overconfidence at the start of this mission. How certain he'd been of his superiority. How he'd dismissed Henry as useless, as a burden. "I'm sorry," Krill said, "about what Edyp and I said on the ship. We thought... we didn't understand." "I know," Henry replied simply. "I heard you. Good ears, even if I've only got one eye." He continued cleaning his rifle, not making a big deal of it. "You're not the first to make that assumption, and you won't be the last. People see the patch, see the age, see the old weapon, and they think I'm past my prime. Hell, maybe I am. But past my prime doesn't mean useless. Just means I have to work smarter instead of relying on being faster or stronger." The extraction ship appeared on the horizon, its engines glinting in the sunlight. Henry stood, slinging his rifle across his back. The ship landed, and the new crew disembarked. A full squad this time, properly equipped and briefed. They would have an easier time of it, thanks to the defenses that Henry and Krill had established, thanks to the lessons learned in blood over the past week. As Krill prepared to board the ship, he looked back at the clearing one more time. He could see his tree, still standing, still scarred from the creatures that had tried to climb it. He could see the Sativ base, intact and safe. And he could see the forest, dark and full of dangers that he now understood how to face. The one-eyed human might be old, Krill realized. He might be crippled by the standards of his own species, missing an eye and carrying the wear of decades in a profession that killed most within years. But Henry was still alive, still functioning, still one of the most effective warriors Krill had ever encountered. And that was what Krill and Edyp had missed at the start of the mission. They had looked at Henry and seen only what he'd lost, an eye, his youth, his pristine appearance. They hadn't seen what he'd gained: experience, wisdom, survival instincts honed across decades of the deadliest work imaginable. In a profession where many die young, the old warriors are the ones who learned all the lessons that the dead ones never got to. They're the ones who survived every mistake that would have killed someone else, who adapted instead of breaking, who kept going when others would have quit. Henry was still alive, and now, thanks to him, so was Krill. As the ship lifted off, carrying them away from that death world and back to civilization, Krill made a decision. He would request Henry for his next protection detail, and the one after that, and everyone after, until the day the old human finally made good on his promise to retire. Because Krill had learned the most important lesson of all. When you're facing a death world, you don't want the youngest warrior or the strongest warrior, or even the warrior with the best eyesight. You want the warrior who's still alive after many years. You want the one-eyed human who hits what you can't even see.